London, February 1977, 2:47 a.m. Bob's telephone rang in the darkness of his Oakley Street flat, pulling him from restless sleep where he'd been dreaming about something he couldn't remember, something uncomfortable that left him feeling watched ever since the shooting in Kingston 2 months ago. The line crackled with static international connection. The sound of distance and interference, no one speaking on the other end at first, just breathing, measured and careful. Then a man's voice, Jamaican accent but controlled, disguised slightly like someone trying not to be recognized. "Check your postbox downstairs, Star. Right now. They've been watching you since '73, recording everything. The shooting wasn't what you think. Trust nobody, not even people close to you." The line went dead before Bob could ask who was calling, leaving only dial tone buzzing in his ear. He sat up in the darkness, Rita sleeping beside him, his heart pounding in a way it hadn't since those gunmen burst into Hope Road. The shooting in Kingston had made him cautious, made him aware of how many forces wanted him silent. Political factions, record industry people who thought he was too dangerous, too revolutionary, but this was different. This felt like something else entirely, something he hadn't seen coming. He pulled on clothes quietly, not wanting to wake Rita. Went downstairs through the cold London night to check the building's post boxes, even though it was the middle of the night, even though every instinct said this could be a setup. There, stuffed into his box like someone had just been there minutes ago, was a manila envelope with no stamps, no return address, no postal marks. Just his name typed on a label with an old typewriter. Inside was a cassette tape, Sony brand, professional quality with a typed note on thin paper. "They're not just recording your music. They're recording your life. Listen to this. Then check your contracts from Island Records, 1972 agreement, page 47. There's language there you didn't understand when you signed. Destroy this tape after you've heard it, burn the note. If they know you have this, they'll move against you." The shooting at Hope Road was the first intervention. "There will be others if you don't stop this." The note was typed on the same machine as the label. No handwriting. No way to trace who'd written it. But the tape was real. Cassette carefully labeled with dates. Professional documentation. Bob went back upstairs, locked the door, checked the windows, feeling paranoia creep in, but knowing it wasn't paranoia if they really were watching. He put the tape in his player, sat on the edge of his bed in the pre-dawn darkness and pressed play. What came through the speakers made his blood run cold. His own voice, but not from any album or single he'd released. These were recordings of studio sessions at Island. Private moments he'd thought were just between him and the musicians. Conversations about arrangements, about lyrics, about the meaning behind songs. But mixed with the music were other sounds. Conversations he'd had in supposedly private spaces. Phone calls from his house in Jamaica discussing Rastafari philosophy, talking about political situations, planning tours and strategies. Every word captured and archived, cataloged with dates written on the tape label in neat handwriting. Session 08-15-73. Phone call 11-20-74. Meeting 6-12-75. Political discussion 3-22-76. Someone had been listening to everything for 4 years, recording his life like he was some kind of laboratory specimen being studied, documenting not just his music but his thoughts, his beliefs, his private moments that should never have been anyone's business but his own. Who had access to this level of surveillance? Who'd been monitoring him since 1973, before he'd even recorded Catch a Fire, when he was still just another reggae artist trying to break through internationally? And more importantly, why were they warning him now? What had changed that made someone on the inside decide to risk everything by exposing this operation? The tape continued, shifting to what sounded like a meeting. Corporate voices discussing him like he wasn't a person but a project. Subject shows strong revolutionary messaging that resonates with youth demographics. Commercial viability high, but political content creates risk. Recommend monitoring for intervention opportunities if anti-establishment themes threaten mainstream accessibility. Then another voice. The Rastafari angle is marketable but needs containment. We can sell the aesthetic without the actual philosophy disrupting consumer patterns. See Protocols Section 47C for guidelines. The clinical detachment in their voices talking about his life, his beliefs, his music as if it were all just data to be managed and monetized, made him physically sick. The tape ended with more typing sounds like someone reading from a document. Subject exhibits pattern of increased political involvement that may limit commercial reach. Recommend intervention if trajectory continues toward activism over entertainment. Previous subjects have responded well to personal crisis events that redirect focus. Then silence. Just the hiss of blank tape running. He sat there as dawn started breaking over London, as the city began waking up outside his window, heart pounding so hard he could hear it, wondering if the paranoia from the shooting was making him imagine connections that weren't there, or if something much worse than he'd understood was happening, something that had been happening for years while he'd been oblivious. He sat there in his London flat as dawn started breaking, heart pounding, wondering if the paranoia from the shooting was making him imagine threats, or if something much worse was happening. By morning, he was exhausted but wired, pulling every contract from the past 5 years, agreements with Island Records, publishing deals with Cayman Music, distribution contracts, licensing agreements, everything he'd signed since Chris Blackwell had discovered him and brought him to London to record. Most looked standard when he skimmed them, legal language about rights and royalties and territories that his lawyer in New York had reviewed and approved back when they were signed. But now he read slowly, carefully, looking for anything hidden in the dense paragraphs of legalese, and then he found it on page 47 of his 1972 Island contract, the original agreement that had launched his international career. Artist monitoring and documentation for quality assurance and market analysis purposes, including but not limited to recording of sessions, documentation of creative processes, and analysis of behavioral patterns as they relate to commercial output. What did that mean in plain language? Recording his sessions was one thing. That could be interpreted as normal, but documentation of creative processes, analysis of behavioral patterns. That sounded like something else entirely, something invasive, something he never would have agreed to if he'd understood what it meant. He found more in other agreements, always buried in sections with innocuous headings like quality control or market research. 11 contracts total giving unnamed third parties permission to observe, document, and analyze artist behavior and output for research purposes related to market optimization. All of these contracts had been negotiated by his business manager from the early Island days, the man who'd handled the details while Bob focused on the music, the man who told him these were standard clauses that every artist signed. Nothing to worry about. Why couldn't he remember exactly why that man had left his employment? It had been sudden, he remembered that. The manager saying he was relocating to America, couldn't continue working with artists based in Jamaica and London, but the details were fuzzy, like there had been more to it that Bob hadn't paid attention to at the time. His telephone rang, making him jump even though it was morning now, making him realize how on edge he was. His lawyer in New York voiced tense in a way that immediately put Bob on alert. "Bob, I just received a telegram from Island Records' legal department. They're claiming you violated contract terms by discussing confidential business arrangements with unauthorized third parties. They're threatening to block your upcoming album releases and freeze your royalty accounts unless you sign a new agreement by the end of this week." Bob hadn't discussed anything with anyone, hadn't even known there was anything to discuss until 8 hours ago, when that anonymous call came through and he found the cassette. "What terms am I supposed to have violated? I haven't talked to anyone about anything." They won't specify the exact violation. They keep citing Section 47 subsection C of your 1972 master agreement, which I have to admit I don't recall reviewing in detail back then. "We were moving fast to get you signed. It was a big opportunity. I may have missed some clauses in the rush." Ice formed in Bob's stomach, spreading cold through his chest. "So either they're bluffing to pressure me, or there's language in that contract you didn't catch when we signed." "Possibly. Bob, I need to ask you directly. Did you sign anything in 1972 or 1973 that I didn't personally review? Anything backstage after shows? Anything in the studio, anything where someone just put papers in front of you and said it was standard?" Bob thought back through those years. The excitement of signing with Island. The pressure to move fast before the opportunity passed, before Chris Blackwell changed his mind about investing in a Jamaican reggae artist. "Man, I signed what they put in front of me." Chris Blackwell said it was all standard industry practice, said every artist on Island signed the same agreements. I trusted that. "Not past me, though," his lawyer said carefully, choosing words with precision. "Or rather, some of these documents may have been modified after I reviewed them, additional pages inserted, or there may have been supplementary agreements I never saw. Someone had to negotiate those monitoring clauses. Someone had to explain them to Island's legal team. Bob's signature on documents he didn't fully understand, contracts with clauses hidden on page 47 that his lawyer never reviewed in detail. Who handled those details back then? Who negotiated directly with Island while Bob focused on the music? His old business manager. The same man who'd left suddenly. The same man whose name appeared as witness on several of these agreements. By afternoon, Bob had made calls, found out the manager had relocated to Miami, living well for someone who'd supposedly retired from the music business. Bob couldn't fly there easily, exile from Jamaica complicated travel, but he had people who could visit, ask questions. 3 days later, they called back with information. The manager had agreed to talk, but only on a recorded line that Bob's people controlled. The conversation was tense, the manager's voice guarded. "Bob, I can't say much, but you need to understand something. When I worked with Island in the early days, I wasn't just managing your business. I was reporting to people who run programs across multiple labels, studying successful artists to understand what makes them work." Studying me? Bob's voice was hard. Since when? Since 73, maybe earlier. They call it the Influence Index. It's not just Island, it's several major labels working together, running behavioral analyses on high-profile artists, trying to figure out what makes someone like you successful, what makes people respond to your message, break it all down into patterns they can replicate with other artists. The words made Bob sick. Why? To manufacture it. If they can predict how you'll respond to pressure, how you create under different conditions, they can apply those patterns to other artists, shape them into controllable versions of what you are naturally, like reverse engineering revolution, so they can sell it without the actual revolution. And these intervention protocols, the manager paused. When subjects deviate from projected patterns, when you start doing things that threaten their commercial interests, they intervene. That shooting at Hope Road in '76, the one that nearly killed you and Rita? Bob's jaw tightened. He'd thought it was political, thought it was about the concert, about choosing sides in Jamaica's violence. You saying that was them? I'm saying the aftermath was managed. The way it pushed you into exile, the way it made you more cautious about political involvement, the way it redirected your energy into touring instead of activism, that wasn't all organic. The intervention brought you back into territory they could profit from. Rage built in Bob's chest, cold and focused. Why you telling me this now? Because I'm done, man. I took their money for 4 years, helped them build this thing around you and 30 other artists, but I can't anymore. I got kids, and thinking about them growing up in a world where even revolutionary music gets commodified and controlled, where nothing's real anymore, I can't be part of it. So you called me at 2:47 in the morning? I can't confirm that. But whoever called you, whoever left that tape, they're trying to help. Everything's in those recordings, evidence of the whole program. The manager's voice dropped. But listen carefully, Bob. Don't try to negotiate with them through lawyers. They'll bury you in legal work for years. You need to force their hand, catch them exposed. The call ended. Bob spent days listening to that cassette over and over, hearing his own life played back to him through surveillance microphones, understanding how much of what he'd thought was private had been documented. But anger was clarifying. Going public now, they'd claim the tape was fake, call him paranoid like they did with anyone who challenged the system. He needed leverage to corner them completely. He called his lawyer, set up a meeting with Island, London office. Tell them I'm ready to discuss their new agreement. Bob, we haven't, I know. Trust me, man. The meeting was in Island's offices near Oxford Circus. All wood paneling and gold records on the walls, designed to remind artists of the power dynamic, of who had made careers and who could break them. Bob walked in with his lawyer and one trusted friend who'd helped investigate the surveillance, neither of them speaking, but both knowing this meeting would determine everything that came next. 3 Island executives waited, Chris Blackwell among them, all arranged on one side of a conference table like judges at a trial. Blackwell stood, extended his hand with that familiar smile that had once seemed genuine. Bob, good to see you, man. I think we can sort this out quickly and get back to making music, which is what we all want, what brought us together in the first place. Bob didn't take the hand, didn't return the smile, just sat down, placed a folder in front of him on the polished wood. The executives exchanged glances, small looks that said they were recalculating their approach. One of the younger execs slid papers across the table toward Bob's lawyer. This is the amended agreement we mentioned in the telegram. It clarifies the monitoring provisions, makes everything explicit so there's no confusion moving forward. We're just formalizing what's always been standard practice in the industry. Bob didn't touch their papers, didn't even look at them. Instead, he opened his folder slowly, deliberately, pulled out photographs he'd made from the cassette tape, stills showing waveforms, showing dates written in neat handwriting, showing the label on the cassette that read, Influence Index Research Project, Subject BM73. He placed them on the table one by one, letting each image land with weight. This is what you've been running on me. My voice, my private conversations, my phone calls from my home in Jamaica, all recorded and analyzed since 1973. Your names are in the documentation I have. Case numbers for 30 other artists you're doing this to. Budget allocations for what you call intervention protocols. Everything you just tried to spin as standard practice and monitoring is detailed in your own internal documents as systematic surveillance and behavioral manipulation. The room temperature seemed to drop. Blackwell's face remained carefully neutral, but the other two executives looked at each other at the photographs, calculating risks and exposures. Bob, Blackwell said slowly, choosing words carefully, I don't know where you got those materials, but those are internal research documents taken out of context. Everything we've done is completely legal under the agreements you signed. We can show you the clauses. Page 47, Bob interrupted, voice calm but carrying an edge that made people pay attention. Section 47, subsection C. I've read it now, carefully, with lawyers who know what that language actually means. But I don't think the other 30 artists in your program gonna see it as legal when they find out what you've been doing. I don't think NME and Melody Maker and Rolling Stone gonna care about your legal interpretations when they hear you've been treating revolutionary artists like laboratory subjects to study and control. And I really don't think your business partners and shareholders gonna appreciate having to explain systematic surveillance and intervention protocols to the press and to Parliament. He let that sink in, watched Blackwell's expression shift slightly, watched the younger execs lean back in their chairs as the implications registered. I've got copies of everything, Bob continued. The surveillance recordings on cassette tapes, your research notes analyzing my behavioral patterns, the intervention logs documenting every time you manipulated situations in my life to generate data for your studies. I know about the protocol you ran after the Hope Road shooting, how you used that real violence to push me in directions that served your commercial interests. I know about the manufactured situations, the amplified paranoia, every time you shaped my life to fit your predictions and your profit margins. One of the younger executives leaned forward, trying to regain some ground. Even if what you're claiming is true, and I'm not conceding that it is, you signed contracts giving us permission for this research. You threatened to go public with confidential internal materials. You'll destroy your own career in the process. Nobody in this industry wants to work with an artist who violates confidentiality agreements and leaks proprietary business information. Bob smiled, and there was no warmth in it, no compromise. You think the people who listen to my music care about your confidentiality agreements when they hear that revolutionary consciousness is being monitored and manipulated by corporations? You think they're gonna side with Island Records when they learn you've been treating artists like products to reverse engineer? You want to go into newspapers and magazines explaining why you need to study revolutionaries to manufacture controllable versions of revolution? I'll take that risk, man. I'll burn my career down if it means exposing what you're doing. What you gonna be left with when your artists find out? When your reputation is destroyed? Bob smiled, no warmth in it. You think the people care about your confidentiality agreements when they hear revolutionary music is being monitored by corporations? You want to explain this in newspapers? I'll take that risk. What you gonna be left with? Blackwell held up a hand. Let's say we were willing to discuss ending this research. What do you want? 3 things, Bob said. 1, you terminate every monitoring clause in every contract I have with Island. No surveillance, no documentation, no analysis. 2, you pay me proper earnings from the past 5 years, not the adjusted numbers you've been giving me. 3, you shut down the influence index completely. Destroy all recordings, all research, and never run this on any artist again. That's impossible, one exec said. You're asking us to give up millions in research investment. I'm asking you to stop treating human beings like they're products you can optimize, Bob interrupted. I'm asking you to let artists be artists instead of test subjects. And I'm giving you a way to do it quietly. That's more than you deserve." The executives asked for privacy, left the room to make calls. 30 minutes later, they returned. 1 month to terminate the monitoring. Will audit earnings through independent accountants. Program shutdown within 60 days with documentation. 2 weeks for monitoring termination. Earnings within 30 days. Program shutdown in 30 days. They negotiated for another hour. Finally, papers were drawn up. Hands were shaken without warmth. As Bob walked out into London rain, he felt something close to victory, but not quite. Because winning meant years had been stolen he'd never get back. But he'd won, and that mattered. The next weeks, Bob verified everything. Trusted people confirmed the monitoring equipment was being removed from studios. When termination papers came through and the earnings payment cleared, significantly more than expected, he felt relief mixed with responsibility. Other artists started calling. "Bob, I got a letter from my label about monitoring provisions. You know something? Check your contracts, page 47. Get a lawyer you trust. Look for language about behavioral research." Similar calls came over the following weeks. 3 months later, another artist called. "They lied, Bob. Program never stopped, just moved to a different company, different name. Still running on a dozen artists. Ice flooded his veins. You're certain?" "Yes. Same methods, same people, different paperwork." He called his lawyer. "Time to go public with those recordings." "Bob, they'll sue you, tie you up legally for years." "I know. Do it anyway, man." The story broke in NME and Rolling Stone in June 1977. By the next week, BBC had it. Parliament members asked questions. The executives resigned. Share prices fell. One interview on TV. "Why risk everything?" "Because someone called me at 2:47 in the morning to warn me. Because staying silent would have made me complicit. Sometimes you have to stand up no matter what it costs." The quote became a rallying cry. The influence index died, and Bob? He kept making music on his own terms, more aware now, understanding the game. The victory cost him. Legal stress, ongoing paranoia. But he'd proven artists didn't have to accept exploitation. His stand became a model for others. The industry was forced to change. Months after everything settled, Bob's telephone rang late one night. The same Jamaican voice from that first call. "Respect, Star. You did what needed doing." The line went dead before Bob could respond. He never knew for certain who made that first call, who left that cassette, but he had suspicions. The old business manager had mentioned kids, mentioned conscience, mentioned wanting to help. The voice had been disguised, but something in the cadence felt familiar. And who else would have access to those surveillance recordings? Who else would know to check page 47? But Bob would never know for certain. Maybe that was intentional. Protection for whoever had risked everything to expose the truth. Whoever it was, they'd changed everything with one anonymous call and a cassette tape. Woken him up, given him tools to break free, trusted him to act. That conscience had rippled outward, touching dozens of artists, reforming practices, bringing down a program that had operated in shadows for years. One person, acting alone, had started a movement. Bob kept that cassette, kept it with his important papers as a reminder. Not of who sent it, but of what it represented. Anyone could make a difference by choosing to act instead of accepting corruption as inevitable. The story didn't end with perfect justice. Some responsible parties escaped. Some damage couldn't be undone. But it ended with change, with artists understanding they had power, with corporations knowing they were being watched now, with exploitation exposed and challenged. And it ended with Bob standing more independent, more aware, owing nothing except maybe that anonymous caller who'd trusted him to fight. He'd learned the lesson. Question everything, read every word, pay attention to the cage before it's built. Because when you stop paying attention, when you accept things as they are, that's when they control you. And by the time you feel it, it's almost too late. Almost, but not quite. Never quite. There's always a moment to choose fight instead of submission, where freedom matters more than security, where you can risk everything to actually own your truth. That choice separates artists who survive with souls intact from those who become commodities. Bob had made his choice, fought his battle, won his freedom. And every day since, he'd worked to make sure other artists knew they could fight too. The surveillance was over. The influence index was dead. The cage was broken. And the music, the real music, could finally be free. Revolutionary music couldn't be fully controlled, and that's what scared them most. But Bob had proven something they didn't want artists to know. You could fight the system and win. You could expose corruption and survive. You could be revolutionary and free at the same time. That was his legacy beyond the music. The proof that resistance was possible, that artists didn't have to choose between success and integrity. The system wanted you to believe you had to compromise, had to accept their terms, had to let them monitor and control and shape you into what they wanted. But Bob had shown a different path. And that knowledge, that example, that refusal to submit, that was more revolutionary than any album could ever be.